Some things break so badly, only the broken know how to put them back together. What would you do if the creature everyone warned you about chose only you? Drop your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe as this powerful story unfolds. Claire Baker didn't make a sound when the ranch hand quit. She didn't chase after him either. Not when he threw his gloves down near the barn door, not when he spat in the dirt and muttered something about damn devil horse, and certainly not when his truck kicked up gravel and disappeared down the dusty road like so many others had before him. Instead, Claire stood there, arms crossed, boots planted, steel in her spine, watching the silhouette in the far paddock shift again. It was always the same story. Someone would take one look at the horse in stall 12, make a few smug remarks about taming the wild, and within days, sometimes hours, they'd be gone, spooked, shaken, and always too proud to admit they were scared. But Claire wasn't like the others. She didn't flinch when the stallion lashed out, didn't blink when he reared back against the fencing. She never raised her voice, never raised a whip. She just watched, waited, not out of fear, but familiarity. There was something about that horse, the deep scars along its flank, the one eye slightly clouded over, the tense way it never turned its back on anyone. It was a mirror, alive and breathing, of something Claire had long buried beneath feed schedules and fence repairs. No one else cared to ask where the horse came from. The auction slip said, "Unclaimed transfer." Some half-dead government transport drop-off with no paperwork, no history, just a number inked across its stall. They hadn't even bothered to name him. Claire had. Whispered it into the silence between midnight chores. Like the old stories her father used to tell her as a girl. A name for the battle-worn. The watchful. She didn't tell anyone the name. She wasn't ready to share it. Not with hands that slapped saddle leather without consent, not with voices that barked commands like he was deaf. Brand wasn't deaf. He just chose not to listen. She respected that. The ranch used to have a crew. Now it was just Claire and her sister's boy, Cal, 17 and as mouthy as a dry hinge. He was only there for the summer, working off community service for joyriding through the high school football field. Claire didn't ask questions. She just handed him a broom, pointed to the stalls, and didn't flinch when he called the work bullshit. Kids like Cal didn't know what real silence was. Not yet. That morning he kicked a shovel into the corner and shouted from the tack room, "That thing tried to bite me!" Claire didn't look up from the fence post she was rewiring. "Maybe he doesn't like your cologne." "It's motor oil." "The same thing." Cal stormed out, wiping his hands on his jeans. He pointed across the yard to Brand's paddock. "You just gonna let that thing stay here? Like, what, he's your new mascot?" Claire pulled her gloves off slowly, her eyes fixed on the way Brand watched the boy, his ears twitching, his body taut but motionless. "He's not a thing," she said flatly. "He's a horse. And until someone earns his trust, he stays, like the rest of us." Cal muttered something she didn't catch and stomped toward the barn. She turned back to Brand, feeling the old ache stir behind her ribs, the ache she never named, the kind that comes from recognizing something, someone who's been abandoned by too many people too many times. There was no timeline, no miracle fix. Claire had stopped trying to explain that to the seasonal hires. Trauma didn't work on a schedule. Neither did horses. Especially not this one. That evening, when the sun started dropping low in gold, she saw movement out by the back fence. Not friend? Someone else. A boy? No, a young man. Late teens, maybe early 20s. Jeans too short at the ankles. A denim jacket with patches she couldn't quite read. And a silence about him that didn't scream trouble. It whispered it. He wasn't supposed to be on the property. Claire stepped off the porch, instinct already calculating the angle, the gate, the nearest phone if she needed to call someone. But she stopped short. The young man was kneeling outside the fence, not climbing it, not shouting, and Bran was still, no basing, not kicking, just watching. The boy held out a brush, one of the old ones from the supply shed, beaten and frayed and likely missing half its bristles. Claire didn't move. Bran did, slowly, deliberately. The air felt like it had been vacuumed out of the space between them, like the whole field had folded itself in around this moment, this quiet exchange. Bran stopped just before the fence. The boy didn't push. He didn't reach. Instead, he lowered the brush to the ground, then backed away 3 steps. Bran waited, then nudged the brush with his nose. Once. Twice. He stepped on it, not by accident, but gently, reining it. Claire felt her throat tighten. She walked forward slowly, enough noise so he'd hear her. He turned, not startled, just aware. She nodded toward the brush. Every day? He hesitated. "My name's Eli," he said finally. "I saw him from the road. Thought maybe he needed someone who wasn't trying to fix him." Claire didn't answer right away. She looked past him at Bran, who hadn't moved away, who hadn't gone rigid with fear or fight. Then back at the boy with sadness in his posture and something older than his years written across his face. "Come back tomorrow," she said, "early." He blinked. "Really?" Claire nodded. "But if you hurt him, if you even scare him, you're gone. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." She walked back toward the house. Didn't look over her shoulder. Didn't have to. She already knew he'd be back. She didn't know why. Didn't need to. Some things the broken just understand. Claire didn't ask him any questions the next morning. She didn't ask why he was back before the sun had fully crested over the hills, or how he'd managed to walk all the way up the gravel road barefoot, his sneakers tied together and slung over his shoulder. She didn't ask about the army patch stitched into his backpack, or the worn paperback hanging from the front pocket by a rubber band, as though it had been read so many times it needed tethering. She just pointed toward the paddock. Same as yesterday. Eli nodded once, no questions either. He moved like he had always been part of the land, cautious, deliberate, light-footed. His movements weren't ranch-trained, but there was something organic about the way he held himself. He didn't walk directly at Bran, he circled, letting the horse track him, giving space. Claire watched from the porch, her hand loosely curled around a coffee mug gone cold an hour ago. Her other hand rested absently on her hip, fingers brushing against the fabric of her father's old work shirt. Her armor when the past got too close. Bran didn't bolt. He didn't rear or toss his head. He just stood there, still and alert, like something deep inside him was calculating this boy the way Claire had once done with strange men at her father's funeral. Quiet doesn't mean safe, she remembered thinking then. And still. But Eli's quiet didn't have the hardness of a lie in it. It had grief, and grief knew grief. He stopped just outside the fence again, this time holding nothing. No brush, no bri. Used himself. He crouched in the dirt, boots still looped together beside him, and then, slowly he sat, legs crossed, palms open on his knees. He didn't even look at Bran. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Claire leaned her shoulder against the porch post, eyes narrowed. She knew better than to interrupt something ancient playing out in the space between a damaged soul and a wounded animal. Cal came out of the barn swearing about a busted hose and something about cowboy monks, but Claire didn't answer. She only raised her hand slightly, a warning, and he caught her gaze long enough to fall silent. He followed her line of sight. "What's he doing?" Cal muttered. "Listening," Claire said, "to the part of Bran that nobody else can hear." Cal rolled his eyes, but stayed quiet after that. Eli came every morning for the next 5 days. Same time. same ritual. He brought no food, no rope, no reins, only silence. On the 6th day, Bran walked to him. Not close enough to touch, not yet, but closer than he'd gone to anyone. Claire watched that morning with her mouth tight and her hands clenched around the porch rail. It was the first time she realized her heart was tethered to that horse, maybe more than to the land itself. The moment Bran crossed that invisible line, something in her chest released, like a string had gone slack. Eli didn't move. He didn't reach. He just said, "Hey, buddy," in a voice so soft Claire had to lean forward to catch it. Bran flicked his ears, stomped the ground once, and lowered his head. The wind shifted. Claire didn't believe in signs, but she noticed them. That afternoon she left a brush by the gate. Not new, not clean, but not broken either. Eli picked it up without a word. Claire didn't speak to him until the following week. She found him sitting on an overturned bucket outside Bran's stall, rubbing the horse's neck in slow, circular motions. Bran's eyes were half-lidded, like he was dreaming awake. "You ever worked with horses before?" she asked from the doorway. Eli nodded, but didn't elaborate. "Where?" He didn't answer right away. "Not a real place," he said finally. "Just one of those halfway homes. Had an old mare they used for therapy. I mucked her stall, brushed her, sometimes." "You in the system?" He shrugged. "For a bit. A few years. Before I aged out." Claire didn't push further. She recognized the wall when she saw it. "You looking for work?" Eli's eyes flicked toward her, wary. "I mean paid," she clarified. "Honest work, not charity. I don't need—" "I didn't offer charity," she cut in. Stared at each other for a beat too long. Then Eli nodded once. "All right." Claire turned to leave. "Miss Baker?" he said. She stopped. "Thanks for letting me stay." She didn't turn around. "You're not staying," she said. "You're working." She heard his quiet laugh as she walked off. The next week, Claire let him into the paddock. She handed him the lead rope and said nothing as he clipped it on. Bran didn't flinch. That alone was a miracle. The kind Claire would never say out loud in case it vanished. The other ranch hands, what few were left, started whispering about the quiet kid with the gift. They didn't call him odd anymore. They watched how Bran followed him, how the horse that once tried to kick through iron let this slip of a boy lead him by a rope of fraying nylon. But Claire saw more than gift. She saw the bruises Ellie never spoke of, the way he slept on the cot in the hayloft without ever asking for a bed, the way his eyes scanned the perimeter every hour like a soldier in hostile territory. She saw the way he never let anyone get too close, except Bran, and that somehow made it all right. By the end of the second week, Bran let him saddle him. Not ride, but saddle. That was enough. Claire watched from the barn, her hand on the rail, heart pounding like it used to before rodeo gates opened and everything inside you got tested. Eli worked slow, careful, no sudden moves, just the rhythm of patience and breath. When the saddle cinch was secure and Bran didn't rear, didn't scream, didn't bolt, Claire let herself smile. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the surface often. Later that night, after the sun dropped and the rest of the ranch turned quiet, Claire climbed the ladder to the hayloft. Ellie was there, sitting up reading by flashlight. She handed him a sandwich wrapped in foil, turkey and mustard, no small talk. He blinked, surprised, but took it with both hands. "Did I ever tell you what Bran means?" she asked. Eli shook his head. "It's Welsh," she said. "Means raven, but is also a name from old war stories, a protector." Eli looked down at the horse, sleeping peacefully in the moonlight through the loft slats. "It protects you?" he asked. Claire looked at him. "No," she said. "I protect him." She turned and started back down the ladder, her voice drifting over her shoulder before she vanished into the dark. "Get some sleep, Eli. You've got a long ride ahead of you." The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address, no name. Just the smudged ink of Claire Baker's ranch, printed in sharp government-style block letters that made her stomach twist the moment she saw it in the mailbox. It wasn't a bill, wasn't junk, it was something else. Something that smelled like old wars and colder truths. Claire didn't open it right away. She slipped it into the back pocket of her jeans and went on feeding the mares, ignoring the weight of it against her skin like it hadn't already soaked into her bones. She didn't open it until sunset, standing by the old hitching post, where the varnish had long since peeled away and the wind carried voices only she could hear. The note was short. A man was coming. A visitor. Colonel Raymond Donovan read. Had called ahead, left a message she never got, and was driving himself in. No assistant, no security. Just him. And he wanted to see the horse. There was no explanation, no courtesy, just a time. Noon. 2 days from now. She read the letter twice, then a third time before folding it up and sliding it under the coffee can that held her father's bolts and screws in the shed. She didn't tell Eli. Not that day. She watched him from the porch that evening, him brushing Bran with the kind of care most people reserved for sacred things. The horse leaned into him now, nuzzled his shoulder, sighed when Eli reached under the bridle. They had carved something quiet and private between them, a space no one else could enter. Claire didn't want to shatter it too soon. The morning of the visit came with a kind of silence that Claire didn't trust. Not the good kind. It was the kind of silence before a door slammed, before boots hit gravel, before things that had been buried decided to claw their way back up through the dirt. Claire had scrubbed the barn, straightened the fence rails, and combed Bran herself before breakfast, not because the Colonel would care, but because she couldn't stand the thought of anyone, him, thinking this place was less than what it was. It wasn't just a ranch, it was memory and medicine. By noon the sun was high, the dust hot, and Brand was pacing in his paddock. Eli stood by the gate, rubbing his palms on his jeans. "You sure this guy's coming?" he asked. Claire nodded once. "Done." "He'll be here." Eli turned to her. "Who is he?" She didn't answer. "Not at first. He's someone who knew Bran before," she said finally. "Back when he wasn't Bran." Eli blinked. "Before?" She didn't explain further. At 12:07, the sound of tires on gravel drew their eyes down the road. A matte black SUV, government-issued or close to it, rolled up slowly, the engine barely louder than the cicadas. The man who stepped out didn't look like someone who was old, but he was. Claire could see it in the way he moved, not slow, measured, like every step had been calculated in advance. He wore a beige field jacket, sleeves rolled up, and a pair of desert boots dusted from the road. His hair was gray but trimmed sharp. His eyes piercing, sharp, the kind that once ordered men to move without raising his voice. He scanned the ranch once, then walked forward like he already knew where everything was. He didn't introduce himself. We just stopped at the paddock fence and froze. Bran did, too. Time stilled. The Colonel's jaw moved like he wanted to say something, but didn't trust his voice. Bran's ears twitched. Then his head lowered, just slightly. Claire had never seen him do that before. Not like that. Eli stood perfectly still beside the Colonel, like he knew this moment didn't belong to him. When the man finally spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. "I thought he was dead." Claire stepped forward, boots crunching the dust. "He was listed as unclaimed, shipped off like cargo with no handler, no paperwork." The Colonel didn't look at her. He was staring at the horse like he'd just seen a ghost. "God," he muttered, "I watched him fall. I thought the blast got him." Bran inched closer to the fence. Not fast, not cautious, just certain. Claire folded her arms. "You knew him?" "I trained him." The Colonel finally looked over at Claire. 3rd Cavalry Regiment, Iraq, 2010. He was more than a mount, he was part of our forward unit. We called him Roach. Eli tilted his head, confused. Rout? The colonel gave a bitter smile. Short for cockroach, because he survived everything? Claire didn't return the smile. He didn't come here with a name, she said. I called him Bran. The colonel's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. Fits. He stepped closer to the fence, lifted his hand, but didn't reach over. Rand took one step, then another, then pressed his scarred muzzle against the colonel's palm. No hesitation. And for the first time in a decade, Colonel Ray Donovan's hand trembled. He didn't try to hide it. Eli watched silently, so did Claire. He dragged me, the colonel said suddenly, voice thick. After the second blast, I was unconscious. Everyone else was dead. I woke up 20 feet from the convoy with him standing over me, blood pouring from his side. He looked at the scars. I couldn't take him back with me. They said he was too damaged, aggressive. Said he'd be put down or transferred to a handler unit. Claire felt her stomach knot. They lied, she said quietly. The colonel nodded once, jaw clenched. I looked for him, filed requests, FOIA petitions, got stonewalled every time. Eli took a step forward. You think he remembers? The colonel didn't answer right away. Then, he remembers everything. That's the problem. Claire studied him. She saw the weight he carried, the way his shoulders sagged now that Brant Roach was in front of him. She also saw the same ache Eli carried. A soldier without a war. A horse without a rider. What do you want with him? Claire asked. The colonel turned to her. Nothing. He swallowed. I thought I wanted closure, some kind of end to it. But now I see he's better off here. Rand had closed his eyes. His whole body slackened like a held breath finally released. The colonel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver badge. Dog tags, tarnished, worn. He passed them across the fence. Claire took them. For him, he said. He won't wear them, Claire said gently. They're not for wearing, the colonel replied. They're for remembering. He looked at Ellie next. You take care of him? Eli nodded slowly. Yes, sir, every day. The colonel looked at him for a long time. You don't call me sir, son. Not unless I earn it. Eli blinked. Yes, Cole. The man held up a hand. Just ring. He turned back to Brand one last time. Then, without another word, walked back to his truck. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Brand stayed by the fence long after the SUV disappeared down the road. The dog tags hung from the hook inside the barn, just above Brand's stall, where the light hit them around noon every day. Claire hadn't polished them. The tarnish, the scratches. That was the point. Like scars, they told a story best left unedited. It had been a week since the colonel's visit. Bran hadn't been the same since, but not in the way people expected. He didn't act broken. If anything, something had loosened in him, like a knot finally untied. He no longer watched every hand with suspicion, no longer kept one eye on the gate. He followed Eli now, fully, with trust, not just tolerance. Eli had begun working more hours, showing up before dawn and staying well past dark. Claire paid him now, real wages, she made sure of it, even when he tried to refuse. You don't do this for free, she told him, not anymore. But I'd still come if you stopped paying me, he replied. That's why I won't stop. There was a quiet between them, the kind that only came after months of mutual respect. He didn't pry into her past, and she didn't ask about his, but still things had changed. Claire found herself smiling more, not wide or often, but real. She started humming when she fixed the water lines or cleaned the stalls. Sometimes, at night, she'd catch herself standing on the porch with a cup of tea, watching Eli and Bran in the moonlight like she was watching something sacred and didn't want to blink too hard. Then the letter came. Not an envelope this time. A thick manila packet, certified, stamped with half a dozen acronyms and an official seal she hadn't seen since her father's funeral. Eli brought it in with the feed order, oblivious. He dropped it on the counter next to the coffee pot. Claire didn't touch it for 3 hours. When she finally opened it, her hands trembled. Inside was the story she never expected to read. Bran, listed as Roach in the documents, had never been transferred to a kill shelter or deemed aggressive beyond rehabilitation, as the colonel had feared. Instead, he had been classified as emotionally unstable post-combat and shuffled through a quiet corner of a forgotten military equine therapy program. Buried, abandoned, a bureaucratic casualty. What the file revealed next stunned her. The program had shut down due to budget cuts, and every horse in that division was marked for destruction. Except one. Roach. The handler had refused the order, had broken protocol, had driven the horse north and left him at a holding pen, scrawling a note on his intake slip that read, "People deserves more than this. Find someone who gets it." No name, no trace, just that. Claire sat on the porch for a long time, packet in her lap, the wind tugging at the edges of the papers. It wasn't closure. It was something deeper. It was a beginning she hadn't known. They'd already started writing. By the end of the week, she had filled out the application to formally adopt Brand. Not just house him, not just care for him, but claim him legally as hers. Ownership was never the point, but permanence mattered. And then came the phone call. It was from the county. Every year, the local fairgrounds hosted a small equestrian showcase. Nothing fancy, just community families and small ranches showing off what they'd raised. There were no ribbons that led to nationals, no money to be made, but it was a way to show the town what mattered. The coordinator had heard about Bran. One of the retired vets on the review board had recognized the name Roach in the packet Claire submitted to the county livestock records. "Is it true?" the woman on the phone asked. "He's alive? That he's well?" Claire glanced out the window. Bran was nuzzling the back of Eli's neck as the boy refilled the trough. "He's better than well," Claire said. "He's home." They invited her to speak. Just a few words, and maybe, if Bran was ready, to let him walk in the showcase, not as a performer, but as a survivor. Claire was hesitant. "But Eli?" Eli said yes before she even finished the question. "I think he wants to," Eli said. "I think he needs people to see him as he is, not as what he was made into." Claire stared at him. There was something unshakable in the way he said it. And so the preparations began. They didn't dress Bran up, no fancy tack, no glitter, no braids in his mane. Just a clean coat, a brush tail, and a halter stitched with his new nameplate. Bran, retired warhorse. The day of the fair was warm but breezy, the kind of day that usually left Claire tense, waiting for things to go wrong. But as they loaded Bran into the trailer, she realized she wasn't afraid. Eli rode in the back with him, one hand on his side the whole way. Not to hold him steady, but just to let him know he wasn't alone. The arena wasn't large, just a ring of aluminum bleachers, a dirt track, a tented area where folks sold lemonade and homemade jerky. But when Bran stepped out of the trailer, a hush fell over the crowd. Word had spread. Veterans from the nearby town came in uniform. One man saluted before Bran even stepped into the ring. A woman clutched a faded photo in her hand, tears already on her cheeks. Claire didn't walk him in. Eli did. Bran followed his lead without a hitch. They made one slow, quiet circle. No music, no fanfare, just footsteps, and the sound of people standing to their feet, one by one, as if rising in silent ovation. When they came full circle, Bran stopped, turned, faced the crowd, and lowered his head. A boy in the front row saluted him, and Bran nodded. Claire's throat tightened. She heard a voice behind her. one she hadn't expected, and knew he'd remember. Colonel Donovan stood at the gate, cap in hand. Claire looked at him, surprised. "You came back." He smiled. "Some debts aren't paid with apologies." He turned to Bran. "And some warriors aren't done fighting. They just change battlefields." After the event, people approached quietly. No one tried to touch the horse. They didn't need to. They just wanted to be near him, to say thank you. That night, back at the ranch, Claire found Eli in the barn, sitting with Bran, one hand resting against the horse's flank. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're not going to ask for time off, are you?" she teased. He looked up, blinking. "Time off? For all that fame, thought you'd be running off to Hollywood now that Bran's a star." Eli grinned. "Nah," he said. "Stars don't shine right without someone holding the light steady." She smiled. And that night, for the first time in years, Claire slept without waking up, at 2 a.m. Bran was home. Eli had found where he belonged. And the ranch, quiet, weathered, and honest, held them both like something sacred. Not fixed, but healing.